In this video, we are going to review integers and computing integers, starting with adding integers. So when I say like signs, I mean two positive integers or two negative integers. So when we're adding them, it might look something like this, 5 plus 3. The rules for adding like signs are add and keep the sign. So I'm going to write add and keep. The rules are to add and keep. So 5 plus 3 is 8. We add it and we keep it a positive. The same thing can be said for negative. So if I have a negative 2 plus a negative 6, the rule is to add and keep the sign. So negative 2 plus negative 6 is negative 8. Okay, let's talk about unlike signs. So unlike signs might be things like a negative and a positive, or a positive and a negative. So that would be negative 5 plus 3. Negative 5 plus 3. The rule for adding unlikes is subtract and keep the sign of the greater absolute. So we're going to subtract these two. 5 minus 3 is 2. We're going to keep the sign that's farther away from 0. The farther away from 0 is the negative. Let's do another one. Let's do negative 2 plus 6. So our rule is to subtract. 6 minus 2 is 4. And keep the sign of the greater absolute, so we're going to keep it positive. Let's look at subtraction. Well, subtraction is the same rule as addition because you add the opposite. Add the opposite. Let's look at what I mean by that. Let's say we have negative 5 minus negative 2. When we add the opposite, we change the subtraction. We physically change it to add the opposite. The opposite of negative 2 is positive 2. So we go back up to our addition signs because now this is an addition problem. Back up to our addition rules. These are unlike signs. Our rules tell us to subtract. So 5 minus 2 is 3. We keep the sign of the greater absolute, so it would be negative 3. Let's look at another example. Let's say we have 6 minus 12. First step is to add the opposite. The opposite of positive 12 is negative 12. Go back to our rules. These are unlike signs, so we're going to subtract them and keep the sign. 12 minus 6 is 6. Keep the sign of the greater absolute. It's negative. Moving on to multiplying and dividing. So multiplication and division. They have the same rules if it's like signs, and what I mean by that are both positive or both negative. It's always going to be positive. For example, negative 5 times negative 6 is 30. If they're like signs, if they're both the same, it's always positive. Another example would be 40 divided by 5 is 8. If they are unlike signs, for example, a positive and a negative, or a negative and a positive, it's going to be negative. So we have negative 5 times a positive 6. The answer will be a negative. Or negative 40 divided by 5. It doesn't matter which one's greater or which one's less. It's always going to be a negative.